Hello and welcome to the last in my series of Cambridge iGCSE English Language Exam Top Tips. And in this video, we'll be looking at tip number 10, Mind the Gap. So we're looking particularly at the writer's effects question and the extended response task on paper 1 to help you prepare for the first exam. We're going to be looking at the details on how you're assessed, looking at advice on completing the tasks, and I'm going to go over a summary of advice from examiners on writing effective responses. So let's begin with looking at the writer's effects task. So let's first of all think about what you're tested on. So you're tested on your ability to demonstrate your understanding of both explicit, that's straightforward, unambiguous, communicated information, facts and details, as well as your understanding of implicit meaning. So that's your hinted at and suggested meaning, the meanings that you kind of have to work out and infer and read between the lines to identify. You're also being assessed on your understanding of the text and the language used. So how well do you show that you've understood what you've read and that you can appreciate how language is used to achieve different effects, how writers can use words and select words for meaning. That links onto this final bullet point. You demonstrate your understanding of how writers achieve effect. So how they influence how, the way the reader feels or thinks or what they imagine. You also show that you're able to comment about the effects of language, so what effect that has in the context of the passage. We're looking at the writer's effects task. And you want to be able to pick out imagery that's effective and be able to express some opinions on that, analyze the way in which the writer has used imagery and what effects are achieved through that use or through the use of language. So let's look at how to answer this question then. So we've looked at what you're being assessed on. Let's think about how to answer this task, on how to produce an effective response for this task. First of all, read the question, identify the focus. So in the question, you will be told what the focus for that paragraph is. So it is about the scene at on the first night of the holiday or whatever it is, the characters, that the scenario that you've been given. So it will specify, use the wording of the question to help you write your overview, okay, and hone in on what that paragraph is focusing in on. Circle and identify the correct paragraphs or mark with an asterisk or however you want to. It's very clear which paragraph you need to use, but you want to make sure you don't get it wrong. The opening words and the final words of the paragraph are given to you in the question to help you identify the correct paragraphs you need to look at. Remind yourself of what's happening in each of those paragraphs. So what's it about? What's going on at that point in time? What's the tone? What feelings are conveyed? Who's involved? What's going on? What's happening at that point? So you want to look at the overall sort of sense of what's going on in that paragraph to help you write that overview statement. And remember, the wording of the question will help you with this too. Think about how the examples of language use in that paragraph work together to create that overall impression. And we've already said what's happening in that paragraph, what's the focus, what's the tone or atmosphere. This will help you when you write your overview statement. What's the effect on the reader and what effect is the writer trying to achieve? You almost have to put yourself in the shoes of the writer and think about why they have chosen to use these particular words and phrases. Underline anything interesting that creates imagery. So any examples, create a short list of possible examples of words and phrases that give you something interesting to comment on and that have layers of meaning that can be peeled back, not just explicit meaning, but we're looking specifically for things like imagery and figurative language. So examples of similes, personification, pathetic fallacy, metaphor. Something that gives you some that gives you something to explore. Now, once you've drawn up your shortlist, you've identified the possibles, you've highlighted or underlined the possible examples that you might want to focus on. Pick the best three in each paragraph. So you've got 6 examples altogether, 3 from each of those paragraphs. Make some notes around your choices. What can you say about each of those words or phrases? What's the literal meaning? What's the implicit meaning? What are the connotations or associations? And finally, what's the effect of that of using those particular words and phrases? In that way, you're going to explain what's shown and the connotations, what's suggested, what's implied. All of those you want to kind of unpick and explore in some detail. What image is being created and why, and what's the effect of it? Link back to the notes that you made for step 3. So thinking about it in the context of the overall paragraph and the passage as a whole. So for the extended response task, what you're being assessed on is your ability to understand, infer, and predict. So how well you demonstrate your comprehension of what's being presented to you, the points and information being presented to you in the passage, how well you're able to read between the lines and draw sensible inferences or conclusions, and how well you are able to use those inferences to predict what might happen. And that's your A3 marks are focusing on your ability to kind of make those inferences and read between the lines. You want to show that you've understood the text, and you also significantly want to kind of adopt the persona of the person that you're being, the character that you're being asked to write as, and adopt their voice. Speak as though you are them. You are not writing as yourself, you are writing in role. So it's almost like a character that you're adopting then, like method acting. You want to write from the correct perspective. So if you're being asked to write as Jose or Manuel or uh, Detective Muller or Elsie Clinch, make sure you're taking on the point of view of the character and look for those clues to what their personality is. You know, what kind of person are they? If they have a dry, sarcastic sense of humor, maybe reflect that. If they seem serious and sort of erudite or, you know, wordy, maybe reflect that in your writing. Think about how you will adapt the information, how will you adapt it for a different audience, a different purpose, and taking on the voice of that character that you're being asked to write as. Make sure you're writing in the correct form. So if you're writing a letter, it should look like a letter. A speech should look like a speech, and so on. Understand the conventions of each of those text types. Write for the audience that is intended, you know, the intended audience. So think about who is going to be reading your piece. Is it a magazine article for young people, for example? Is it a letter to a store manager, or is it a letter to a friend? That will clearly have you know, an impact on the vocabulary you use and the style and the level of formality. Write for the correct purpose. So these are linked. So audience, purpose, and text type are linked here. So that's important to bear in mind. And use the relevant details in the passage, text C, to help you produce an effective response. Develop those ideas where appropriate, and include some details from the passage as well where relevant. Using your own ideas and your imagination, you can develop some of those ideas. But remember, anything you include must be rooted in, tethered to the text. Otherwise, you know, it's not going to be credit worthy. Make sure that your writing is organized, clear, fluent, and accurate. Use the bullet points to give you a structure for your response. So how to answer? Read the question carefully. Be clear on the genre, what kind of writing you're being asked to produce, who you're writing for, who the intended audience is, and what the purpose is. And make sure that your writing and your style and your vocabulary and your level of formality, your register, is matched to genre, audience, and purpose. Think about perspective. Whose perspective are you being asked to take on? Whose viewpoint are you being asked to write? um, from. And what are the keywords in the question? Make sure that you understand what the bullet points are asking, and look out for bullet points which contain more than one idea, and look and read the passage closely to pick up on relevant ideas. Reread and highlight the text with three different colors, a highlighter, one for each of those bullet points, and making sensible inferences where appropriate. Plan your response, then write your response, and build in proofreading time to check through your response and make any corrections that might be needed for spelling, punctuation, grammar, etc., misspelt words. Just put a neat line through and write it the correct version. And it's very easy in exam situations to for mistakes to creep in. So you want to try and make sure you're minimizing that to ensure you are awarded the highest marks possible. So let's look finally at examiners' comments taken from an examiner's report. So candidates do well, we're told, when they address the tasks in the order set. They follow instructions and respond appropriately to the command words. So look out for those command words and make sure that you're answering appropriately. So where you're asked to identify or state you're providing that information. Where you're asked to explain using your own words, you are using your own words, and so on. So think about the evidence. They want to see evidence of skills, and think about how you show that for the questions that you're asked. And make sure that you are complying with the guidance there. The number of words suggested are guideline numbers of words. So you don't need to worry about being penalized if you write more than that. The only task which you have to kind of make sure you're sticking to the word limit for is the summary. Do not just lift text, lift words or chunks of phrase, chunks of sentences and sections of the passage and put it into your response. If you sort of unselectively copy, you won't be rewarded for that, because you haven't shown that you've understood your idea, understood what you've read, and you haven't expressed things using your own words. So it's important that you do that. Make sure that you're thinking about the ideas, opinions, and details in the text rather than inventing backstories or additional fictional details. And you want it all to be linked to the passage. Anything that you include has to be tethered to the passage that you're basing your response on. Use your own words where required and where instructed to. Use your own words. Make sure that you are. Go back to the text and cross-reference against the question to make sure you're not missing anything, and to check that what you're including is indeed relevant to the bullet point or the focus of the question. And make sure you're not missing anything that might be important. Close reading is really important for this. Planning your response is helpful, especially for the longer written tasks, and this goes for the directed writing task and the descriptive or narrative writing task on paper 2 as well. A plan will help you make sure you're kind of thinking, you're organizing your ideas, and it will help you sort of stay on track and avoid going off course. Give equal attention to all aspects of the question. So, for example, for the extended response task, make sure you're giving each of those bullet points equal weight and covering all of them adequately. Select material that's appropriate for the question. Do not just repeat material, because you can't get double credit. So don't include the same idea for two parts of your extended response task response, because you won't get double the mark. So you'll be wasting your time, and you could use that time in other ways in a more valuable way. Edit your response. If you have made any mistakes, you can go through and correct, and that's fine. You want to make sure you're building in proofreading time to give you that opportunity. So that's the end of my Cambridge iGCSE English language exam top tips. One final reminder to always bear in mind the genre, the audience, and the purpose. Those are the key aspects to bear in mind when writing any kind of response. best of luck to you all, and let me know how it goes. And one final reminder that you can still purchase the Cambridge iGCSE English Language Exam Preparation course, which covers all assessment criteria and all the skills necessary for success. I cover past paper assessment task walkthroughs with exemplars that I've written to illustrate strong responses to help you really understand and get to grips with what examiners are looking for and help you produce effective responses with lots of exam advice, guidance, and tips. I hope you've enjoyed this series of Cambridge iGCSE English Language Exam top tips and that you found them helpful, and best of luck.